We found a statue of a woman down by the river. Part 5, The Great God Pan. I was at the final chapter, rapidly reaching the end. Only Lou and I were still awake, engrossed in the book, the adults napping in their seats. I tried not to look at the window as I read. I was afraid I'd see a face peering in at me. We'd come to the little area where the statue was, where the girls had danced to the death. There was no one there anymore. Glenn's breathing got all harsh. He must have been thinking about Belladonna. We quickly ran across the weird water, knowing if we slowed down we'd sink. I shivered thinking of how we were walking on the graves of about half a dozen girls. When we reached the trees, Sky looked over his shoulder at the base of the statue. Glenn and I looked over, but it was just the usual unintelligible symbols. Yet Sky seemed to be able to read them. "Hold my hand and make a wish, rose gold," he whispered as he read. "How can you read that?" I asked at once. Sky looked confused. "Huh?" he said. It's just regular words." We looked again. It was still just symbols to us. "You reckon it's changed to English just for Sky?" Glenn whispered. Then he let out a huge shaky gasp as Sky ran for the statue. He reached over to take her hand, glass and nails sticking into his leg. "I wish that my boyfriend Morris is okay," Sky said. "I wanna have a baby with him." Glenn and I were gobsmacked. We always knew Morris and Sky were close, but we'd never realized they were together. "Wait, you and Morris were dating?" Glenn said. As Sky ran back to us, he couldn't look us in the eye. Before he could answer there was a call of, "Over here." We looked over and saw 3 figures waving at us from the tree line. The surviving girls. We ran forward, Glenn at the front with a desperate, eager look on his face. We ran into the forest, finding Dandelion, Wisteria and Winter. Glenn's face fell at once. "I'm so happy you made it," Dandelion cried to Sky as they hugged. Glenn was silent, staring over at the marsh with Rose Gold standing in the middle. He squeezed his fists tight, staring down at his feet. His eyes were clouded over with tears and he was trying not to cry. "I'm so sorry," said Winter, putting her hand on his shoulder. Then she took the flare gun, pointing it at the morning sky. She shot it into the air and the pink light burst above the trees. We began to walk together for the clearing of love. We all sat in the grass together. From down in the main clearing I heard the sound of a horn being blown. "The Great Pan approaches," called out Liam's voice. The 6 of us exchanged uncomfortable looks. I think with all the shock and horror of the Kothpo, we'd temporarily forgotten what the prize was. We were going to have an orgy with each other and Liam. At once, everyone was on edge. Winter's face was drawn and harrowed. Sky was rocking back and forth on the spot and Glenn looked like he had swallowed vinegar. "Look, I was your regular hormone-addled teenage boy, but even I didn't want to take a part of this." Just imagining Liam leering over us as we awkwardly groped at each other made my skin crawl. "I don't want to have sex with Liam," Wisteria said in a tiny voice. She was only 13. "God," said Glenn in a disgusted voice. He looked around at us all. "Most of you are kids." "I'm 28. Winter, you're the next oldest and you're 20. You're all way too young. I don't want to sleep with any of you." He threw his hands up. "What about poor Dandelion and Sky? Does he expect you to participate with each other?" "And gods, he's your dad, Dandelion. This is sick. This is just sick." He got to his feet. In the distance, we heard clumping footsteps down the path getting closer and harsh, heavy breathing. "I'm not doing it," said Glenn. "Also fuck this whole community for standing by and letting it happen." Winter nodded as she got to her feet as well. "Gwen had the right idea," she said. "I'm getting out of this place." With that, the 2 oldest were running for the forest. We teenagers just stared among ourselves, slightly flabbergasted. At the tree line, Winter glanced around at us. She gestured madly. "Come on," she called. Getting to our feet, we blindly ran after her. All of this was just so insane. I think we were just going with the flow without a second thought. At that moment, if someone told me to get into a fist fight with Liam, I probably would have just did it. "What's going on?" Liam's voice called out. Looking behind me, I saw he'd reached the clearing. He was wearing his furry goat legs and horned headband, carrying a knapsack. Explaining this to people later on got a lot of laughs. In hindsight, it was bizarrely funny. This man dressed as a goat, furious he wasn't getting laid. At the time it wasn't funny at all. "Where do you think you're going?" he screamed, red in the face. "What are you doing?" He dropped his knapsack to the ground and then charged at us. Fear gripped my body as I ran off after the others. There was a wailing sound as though something had been shot through the air. I looked around and saw something land in the bushes a few feet away. Then a resounding bang made me throw myself back, birds flying for the air with a screech. Pink smoke was billowing from the bushes, filling up the sky in huge clouds of color. I couldn't see through it at all, completely blinded. Soon it seemed like the whole forest was coated in pink. I'd lost sight of all the others. I heard them all shouting for each other. Normally we used smoke bombs for emergencies if we got lost during forest hikes. This, however, had been used as a complete attack to the senses. I ran through the clouds of pink, hearing Liam yell somewhere behind me. "How dare you disrespect your culture?" he screamed in a fury. "How dare you disrespect the great god Pan?" I coughed uncontrollably, my eyes streaming in the pink smoke. He'd brought this with him. He was prepared for us to fight back. If we didn't want to participate, he would have forced us. There was another wailing sound of something whizzing through the air. Something denoted, but I didn't see any smoke. Then all at once there were screams of pain and my face began to burn. My eyes and nose were streaming and I clutched at my face with agony, coughing and spitting up. All I thought as I staggered to and fro was, why the hell was this shit? In hindsight I realized it was a canister of tear gas. Why would he have tear gas? Did he just always carry that on him at all times? It might seem like a complete melodramatic overreaction, smoke bombing and tear gassing us because we ran away from his orgy. Yet I don't think deep down it was really about the sex. He was losing control of his cult and it had thrown him into a rage. I spotted Wisteria a few steps ahead, heaving for breath trying to rub her eyes. Liam emerged from the smoke and I saw him grab Wisteria by the plate, tugging her head back. Instantly I ran forward and pushed my hand into his face, feeling the crunch of his nose beneath my palm as blood spurted forward. He screamed with pain, letting Wisteria go. It was the only helpful thing I did this entire experience. Into the river. I heard Glenn yell as we coughed and sputtered, crashing about like stunned rabbits. "It'll wash it out." Grabbing Wisteria's arm we ran blindly towards the sound of rushing water. I saw ahead of me, Sky tripping over a tree branch into the river. I think Glenn just meant to wash out our eyes. But we were in such a mad panic, we all just jumped in instead. I heard Liam's shout behind us as I plunged into the icy water, pulling Wisteria with me. The whole world was a crashing, roaring rush of water as we were swept away. I slowly awoke to the gently sound of the running river and water dripping. I was staring up at the dark stone of a cave wall. I looked to my side. Curled up on the damp cave floor was everyone else and we were all beginning to wake up. I became aware of a presence behind us and the shadow of a shape just moving slightly. "Now don't turn around, okay?" someone said. "Look forward." We all immediately obeyed. Being alone in a cave and hearing a deep male voice would probably terrify anyone else. But there was very calm atmosphere in the cave. The voice was friendly and soothing. I felt totally at ease. "So what's the matter with you all?" said the voice. Although he sounded nice, we were too shy to answer. Sky had his head buried in Dandelion's arm and she was stroking his hair comfortingly. "We trying to get out of this forest," Glenn finally spoke up. "Why is that now?" the voice said. Glenn explained everything that had happened, the figure only interrupting Tom and Han. "So the prize was to have sex with Pan, eh?" the voice said. "Very flattering. Sorry though. Most of you look a bit too young. Also it doesn't look like you even really want to, do you?" I shook my head, feeling the others move beside me. At the time, the words didn't really make an impact but afterwards they haunted me. "Oh my dears, you've gone through such a terrible ordeal. the figure said. "It's okay. Now if you walk out of this cave, you'll see a path that will lead you back to the human world away from here. All you have to do is follow it. And whatever you do, don't turn around until you reach the human road. Keep looking forward. Do you understand?" We all nodded and said our affirmations. "Lovely," he said. "Off you go now." Getting to our feet, we walked out of the mouth of the cave and onto the river bank. I noticed Sky was carrying a sodden backpack which he opened, revealing a waterproof interior filled with food. We all stared at him. "When he did the pink smoke, he left his bag behind," he said. "So I took it." He started passing out bread with butter, cheese and apples and then an oilskin of wine. We all muttered thanks as we greedily ate and drank. As we devoured the food, we stared up at the narrow muddy path that the mysterious figure had told us to walk. It was so steep, it was like walking up a wall. The river roared all around us and it slowly dawned on us that not only would it be exhausting to walk, if we misstepped, we'd tumble into the raging waters below. I felt myself on the edge of completely losing my mind. After all of this, the final part was another absolute nightmare. "All right," Winter sighed. "Come on everyone." We moved forward to the beginning of the slope. Sky stepped down on his foot and gasped with pain. It was the leg that had been cut on the base of the statue, the one that had been caught by a branch when he'd tumbled into the river. "Hurts," he whimpered, hopping on the spot. "Can't walk." "I'm sorry." "It's not your fault," said Dandelion. She put an arm around his shoulder and Sky put his weight on her. She helped him walk towards the slope. We used the branches growing to the side to help pull ourselves up. The higher we got, the more deadly the drop became. Falling into the river at that height would break every bone in the body. Soon we were gasping for breath and drenched in sweat, struggling through the mud. A stitch burned in my side and my lungs screamed for oxygen. I was really thankful I'd eaten. I don't know how we would have done it hungry and thirsty. We were halfway up when Glenn slipped. The branch he was holding snapped under his hand. He thumped to the ground and began to slide down. Wisteria turned to grab at him as Dandelion yelled, "No, don't." Wisteria froze on the spot, her face twitching and her eyes bugging out, her mouth wide open. For a few moments I didn't know what was wrong. Had she seen something? I almost turned to look and Dandelion grabbed my hand. "Remember what he said," she hissed. "Whatever you do, don't turn around." I felt an icy chill go through me. I heard Glenn's helpless yell and then a resounding crash of something hitting the water. Then Wisteria's hands flew to the sides of her head, fingers digging into her hair. She let out a horrible wail. She began to thrash from side to side, still screaming. She started to pull out her own hair, nails gouging into her scalp leaving bloody trails behind. Winter rushed to her, grabbing her around the middle. "It's okay, it's okay," she said, trying to calm her. Then all at once, Wisteria wrenched violently to the side, throwing herself off the edge of the path, taking Winter with her. They both crashed into the raging river and were swept away under the current. Dandelion, Sky and I just stood there in silence for what seemed like years. Sky still had his face hidden in his sister's arms, his injured leg slick with blood as Dandelion hugged him in a vice grip. We didn't say or do anything, just stood there, listening to the sounds of the birds chirping and the breeze blowing and the river rushing. It was like something had snapped in my mind. I completely fell apart, leaning over sideways into the bushes and sobbing uncontrollably. "I can't do it, I can't," I cried. "They're all dead, they're all dead." What was that back there in the cave? This is just mad. This is just fucking mad. I think I was on the same path as Briar and Forest, on the edge of having a breakdown from the trauma. "Get up," Dandelion hissed at me, grabbing my arm. "Get up, goddammit." I cried like a baby throwing a tantrum, unable to find the strength to walk, my face a mess of blubbering tears. Dandelion dragged two hysterical teenage boys up the rest of that ungodly steep muddy hill, Sky under one arm, crying into her chest, dragging me along with the other arm. She didn't fall once. If she'd have slipped even slightly, we all would have ended up dead. Above us, we could see the ground evening out. She fell to the solid earth, cutting up her knees and palms. Then she vomited up all the bread, apples and wine. Out of everything that had happened, that was what I'm most ashamed of, that I had to be dragged to safety. Sky couldn't help it, he was injured, but I should have pulled it together. Judge me all you want, I definitely deserve it. If it wasn't for Dandelion, I would have ended up floating dead in the river like so many of the others. A few steps away was a metal traffic barrier and beyond was a busy highway. Dandelion flagged down a car, something we'd never seen before in our lives. When the ambulance and police came, I was such a mess they had to sedate me. I don't remember much of my hospital stay. I think I just slept for most it. Sky almost lost his leg to infection, but he pulled through with only a limp. After all of that, we'd made it. Afterwards, Dandelion and I did turn to each other for comfort and ended up having a baby, Eloise. We didn't really have romantic feelings though. It was more just we'd survived such a traumatic event together. So me, Dandelion and Sky were the only known survivors. The authorities raided the valley and rounded up Liam and the rest of the cult. Even after the trial they didn't reform. They all must have seen Liam's rampage with the smoke bomb and the tear gas. He'd presented himself as this loving hippie leader when in reality he had kept weapons to attack anyone who tried to escape. Instead of a happy community, they found that they had unknowingly been taken hostage the entire time. Even though no one stayed with Liam, none of them testified against him either. Fear, I guess. We've never found Gwen, Fern and Hazel. There are rumors that there are witches in the valley, which might have just been sightings of them. Either they're still there or they escaped into society and preferred to shun the spotlight. Or they're dead, who knows? The river and swamp was dragged and the bodies of everyone except Briar, Morris and Rowan were found. We still don't know if they survived, and if they did survive, where the hell they are. The authorities took Rose Gold to be tested and investigated in a lab by scientists. Something bizarre was happening to it. She grew a human womb and a baby started to form inside it. No one knew how the hell it was happening, how the baby was getting nutrients, how the womb could exist without any other internal organs, how in the hell an inanimate object could get pregnant. Rose Gold was carefully monitored until one day, the golden metal stomach opened up like a clamshell and the screaming baby was born. It was whisked away to be tested. The DNA came back saying it was Morris and Sky's baby. Rose Gold had carried the child as a surrogate somehow. This absolutely baffled everyone who heard about it. My brain hurts just thinking about it for too long. Look, we can't really explain it logically. Rose Gold defies logic. All we knew is that although Morris was still missing, Sky's wish had come true. He had Morris's baby, which meant that Morris must be still alive somehow. Yet we still never found him despite putting his name and image out on television. Sky named the baby Francis. Rose Gold went missing soon after that. The secret of the mysterious, magical artifact was all over the news and the lab was broken into. Authorities tracked the thief down to a shabby apartment where he admitted to selling it on the black market. The buyers had ended up in a shoot-up over the statue with no survivors. Witnesses say they saw a man carrying a statue run into the forest before getting shot in the back of the head. When he fell to the ground, the statue tumbled down a ravine and into the roaring river. I always reckoned Rose Gold had manipulated her way back home again. Everyone has their theories about Rose Gold, that she's a cursed statue from ancient times or she's an alien that fell to Earth. She was thoroughly investigated and we were told she wasn't made from ancient or alien metal. She was a replica of a sculpture made in the 1840s, the Veiled Vestal Virgin by Raphael Monti. The original was in a place called Chatsworth House in England. She was just a trinket made by an ordinary person, made to be sold in a gift shop. No, there's nothing extraordinary about her shell. It's just there's something in there, something we couldn't pick up with our technology. I think it's some peculiar spirit. I don't believe in heaven or hell, but maybe if you do believe in all of that, you'd say it was a demonic possession. Maybe it's an interdimensional spirit or a powerful ghost. I don't know. None of the theorists ever saw Rose Gold, cause if they did they wouldn't say it was a devil possession. She just didn't give off a malicious vibe, an unearthly vibe. Sure, that made all the hairs on your neck stand up and your skin crawl. But a maggot eating the wound of a living person wasn't evil, even if it was hurting someone. It was just doing what it had to do to survive. That's how I think of Rose Gold. She hurt us, but it wasn't with ill intent. It was just doing what was natural for her. Even though everyone who's ever seen her agree she wasn't evil, we all agreed that we never wanted to see her again.